More than 30 years have passed since Seventh Heaven first aired, and the people who brought the Camden family to life went through marriages, scandals, tragedies, and reinventions that nobody watching in 1996 could have predicted. One of them hid a devastating secret behind the image of the most trusted TV father in America. And when the truth surfaced, it ended his career overnight and is still being dissected in documentaries today. Another was part of a real set of quadruplets and lost his life in a car accident at just 21 years old. A third detonated her own music career on live television in front of millions of viewers, and somehow turned the humiliation into a second act nobody saw coming. A fourth started out playing a forgettable teenage boyfriend and ended up wearing the cape of Superman himself. Number 1. Nicholas and Lorenzo Brino as Sam and David Camden. Some characters are born directly into the story, and few births in television history were stranger, behind the scenes, than the arrival of Sam and David Camden. When the twins were introduced in the show's most watched episode ever, in February of 2000, nobody watching at home could have guessed that the babies on screen were not one set of twins but two, alternating in and out of the same crib. Sam and David were, in reality, played by four different children: Lorenzo, Nicholas, Mirinda, and Zachary Brino, quadruplets born September 21st, 1998, in Woodland Hills, California. All four were roughly 17 months old when they began rotating through the roles, a practical solution that let the production dodge child labor time restrictions on set. Their parents, Tony and Shauna Brino, wanted the kids to have as normal an upbringing as possible, and were famously reluctant to push any of them toward more acting work. The mother said publicly that she'd keep letting them do it only as long as it stayed fun. As the quadruplets grew older, nature did what casting directors couldn't control. The four toddlers began to look less and less alike. By around 2001, Mirinda and Zachary quietly aged out of the parts, while Lorenzo and Nicholas settled permanently into Sam and David for the remaining seasons. It's a detail that still makes fans do a double take decades later. An entire quarter of the Camden family's youngest generation was, technically, being played by twice as many children as viewers ever realized. The family had an older half-brother, Antonio, from their father's previous marriage, who would go on to attend the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, about as far from a soundstage as a life can get. For Lorenzo and Nicholas, Seventh Heaven would remain their only professional acting credit. Once the show ended in 2007, both brothers stepped away from Hollywood entirely and returned to a private, ordinary life in California. Their brother Zachary made one more small return to the screen, appearing in the final 2 episodes of What About Brian, the ABC dramedy that, in a strange full-circle twist, starred Barry Watson, who had played their television older brother, Matt Camden, years earlier. Then, on March 9th, 2020, tragedy struck. Lorenzo Brino, driving alone on Yucaipa Boulevard in San Bernardino County, lost control of his car at 3:05 in the morning and struck a utility pole. He was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 21 years old. His sister Mirinda posted a raw, heartbroken tribute online. "You might be gone, but it's true when people say, gone but never forgotten." Beverley Mitchell, who had sung the twins to sleep on screen years earlier, wrote that her heart was broken for the family, remembering so many fun memories watching them grow up. Nicholas Brino, now 27 years old in 2026, has remained largely out of the public eye, occasionally resurfacing in cast reunions and tributes to the brother he once shared a childhood role with. Two boys who were never really twins at all, playing twins who were never really theirs alone to play. A small piece of trivia fans still pass around. Since every Camden child besides Lucy was given a biblical first name by their minister father, Sam and David stood out as the one pair partly named off-screen, after the classic R&B duo. Sam and Dave, a little wink from the writers buried inside the show's most-watched single episode. Number 2. George Stultz as Kevin Kinkirk. There are actors who join a hit show as an afterthought and end up staying for years, and George Stultz's path onto Seventh Heaven is one of the stranger examples of Hollywood nepotism working completely by accident. He was 26 years old when he first appeared as Officer Kevin Kinkirk in the fall of 2001, a role that was never supposed to exist in the first place. George Sheehy Stoltz was born August 16, 1975, in Detroit, Michigan, and grew up in the small mountain town of Green Mountain Falls, Colorado. In high school, he was a wrestling champion with genuine athletic talent, and for a while, he seriously considered enlisting in the U.S. Navy instead of chasing an acting career at all. What changed his path was almost absurdly random. A commercial talent agent spotted him eating lunch one day, walked over, and handed him her card. Encouraged by her, he abandoned the idea of military service and started auditioning around Los Angeles instead, landing small guest spots on Will and Grace and Friends. Here's where the story gets interesting. George's younger brother, Jeff Stoltz, was already a recurring cast member on Seventh Heaven, playing fireman Ben Kirk, one of Mary Camden's love interests. George actually auditioned for a completely different minor role, a delinquent kid who pressures other characters into drinking. But when producers realized the actor in front of them happened to be the real-life older brother of Jeff Stoltz, they rewrote the part entirely, creating the character of Kevin, Ben's police officer older brother, specifically to put two real siblings on screen as television siblings. Before any of that, Stoltz had already logged a smaller, forgettable guest spot on Everybody Loves Raymond, a role so minor it barely registered next to the family drama that would soon define his career instead. Kevin went on to marry Lucy Camden, becoming the family's longest-running son-in-law, and taking over as the show's steady older brother figure once Matt Camden left for New York. After Seventh Heaven ended, Stoltz worked only sporadically, taking small television and film roles through the 2010s and largely avoiding social media and the spotlight altogether. In October 2025, he made a rare, much-talked-about reappearance on the former cast's Rewatch podcast, Catching Up with the Camdens, sporting a thick mustache and gray stubble that left longtime fans stunned by how different he looked. "This is a tight-knit group," Stoltz said of his old castmates, "which makes going to work every morning enjoyable. I will just be sitting back and think how fortunate I was to be part of a TV show that was so special." Today, in 2026, George Stoltz is 50 years old, largely retired from the business, and remembered fondly by fans mostly for a role that was invented purely because of who his brother happened to be. Number 3, Ashlee Simpson as Cecilia Smith. Few actors on this list ever became more famous for 8 seconds of live television than for anything they did on Seventh Heaven itself. Ashlee Simpson joined the show in 2002 as Cecilia Smith, the on-again, off-again girlfriend, first of Simon Camden and later of Martin Brewer. She was 17 years old when she stepped into the role, and her time on the Camden family's doorstep would turn out to be only a footnote in one of the most talked-about pop culture meltdowns of the decade. Ashlee Nicole Simpson was born October 3, 1984 in Waco, Texas, to Joe Simpson, a former psychologist and Baptist youth minister, and Tina Simpson. She is the younger sister of pop star Jessica Simpson, and her earliest showbiz work was simply dancing as a backup performer in her older sister's stage shows. She began appearing in television commercials at 15, and her recurring arc on Seventh Heaven gave her a national platform right as she was quietly working on a debut solo album behind the scenes. That album, Autobiography, debuted at number 1 in the United States in the summer of 2004, and would eventually be certified triple platinum. But it was what happened months later, on October 23, 2004, that turned Ashlee Simpson into a punchline for years. Performing on Saturday Night Live, her pre-recorded vocal track for a completely different song began playing over the studio speakers while she stood silently holding her microphone. Visibly panicked, she did an awkward, aimless little jig and walked off stage, later blaming the mishap on acid reflux and her band starting the wrong track. It remains to this day one of the most replayed embarrassments in the show's 50-year history, discussed in documentaries and clip compilations to a degree that dwarfs any single episode of Seventh Heaven she ever filmed. Rather than disappearing, Simpson doubled down, launching an MTV reality series, The Ashlee Simpson Show, which turned her private life into ratings gold and made the world newly aware of her rhinoplasty and vocal struggles, subjects she'd once tried to keep hidden. She married Fall Out Boy bassist Pete Wentz in 2008. The marriage ended in 2011. In 2014, she married musician Evan Ross, son of Diana Ross, making the legendary Motown icon her mother-in-law. In the years since, Simpson has continued recording music, taking small television roles, and occasionally lending her voice to animated projects. Today, in 2026, Ashley Simpson is 41 years old, a woman who once nearly imploded her career in 8 seconds on live TV and built an entirely new one out of the wreckage. Number 4. Tyler Hoechlin as Martin Brewer. Some actors arrive on a show as a minor supporting character and quietly leave a few seasons later, seemingly destined for nothing more than being a footnote. Tyler Hoechlin's 4 years as basketball player Martin Brewer on Seventh Heaven looked at the time like exactly that kind of role. Almost nobody watching in 2003 could have guessed they were looking at a future Superman. Tyler Lee Hoechlin was born September 11, 1987, in Corona, California. He began appearing in commercials as an infant, and at just 13 years old, he was chosen out of 2,000 auditioning children for the demanding role of Michael Sullivan Jr. opposite Tom Hanks in the 2002 gangster drama Road to Perdition, a performance that earned him both a Saturn Award and a Young Artist Award. He was 16 years old when he joined the Camden universe as Martin Brewer, a role he'd hold on to through 2007. Hoechlin's path after Seventh Heaven is one of the more remarkable trajectories on this entire list. He turned down the role of Emmett Cullen in the Twilight franchise in order to focus on his other serious passion, baseball. He genuinely played college ball, first at Arizona State University, then in the amateur Northwoods League for the Battle Creek Bombers, and later at UC Irvine, treating acting almost as a side pursuit for years. That changed when he was cast as brooding werewolf Derek Hale on MTV's Teen Wolf in 2011, a role that turned him into a bona fide teen heartthrob all over again. Then, in 2016, Hoechlin was cast as Clark Kent, Superman himself, on Supergirl, a role he'd go on to reprise as the lead of his own series, Superman and Lois, from 2021 to 2024. The boy who played a minor basketball-playing boyfriend on a family drama about a minister's household had, decades later, become the most recognizable superhero on the planet for an entire generation of CW viewers. He's also lent his voice to Sephiroth in the Final Fantasy VII Remake video game series, adding video game icon to a resume that started with a background role in Glen Oak. Today in 2026, Tyler Hoechlin is 38 years old and remains one of the biggest breakout success stories to ever emerge from the Camden's extended television family. Number 5. Mackenzie Rosman as Ruthie Camden. Very few child actors are asked to grow up on national television for 11 consecutive years, aging in real time in front of millions of strangers. Mackenzie Rosman did exactly that as Ruthie Camden, the family's youngest daughter, and the transition out of that role turned out to be far bumpier than anyone watching at home ever suspected. Rosman was born December 28, 1989, in Charleston, South Carolina, and moved to Los Angeles as a toddler. She'd already been doing national commercials for Nike, Hormel, and Huggies before she was cast on Seventh Heaven at age 7, reportedly winning over the producers during her audition by personally walking around the room and shaking every single person's hand. She was just 6 years old when the pilot aired in the fall of 1996. For over a decade, Rosman was America's little sister, the curly-haired kid who grew from a squabbling child into a teenager dealing with the same coming-of-age storylines her older siblings had lived through years before. But the transition after the show ended in 2007 hit her harder than most fans realized. Rosman later opened up about experiencing genuine depression and anxiety in the years immediately afterward, describing the sudden loss of her on-set routine and her television family as disorienting in a way she hadn't expected. Then in 2013, at 23 years old, Rosman posed for a suggestive photo shoot in Maxim magazine, a spread that set off a wave of tabloid shock headlines built entirely around the idea that little Ruthie Camden was all grown up. It wasn't her first brush with that kind of controversy. Some similar photos of her had already circulated online back in 2008, and the attention echoed almost exactly what her former on-screen sister, Jessica Biel, had gone through years earlier with a very similar magazine controversy of her own. Rosman, for her part, brushed off the criticism at the time, saying simply, "It's who I am." In the years since, Rosman has largely stepped back from the spotlight. She gave birth to her daughter, Ophelia Caitlin, in 2022, and today lives a quiet life on a farm in Baltimore County, Maryland. In 2024, she reunited with former co-stars Beverley Mitchell and David Gallagher to launch Catching Up with the Camdens, a rewatch podcast revisiting the series episode by episode. Today in 2026, Mackenzie Rosman is 36 years old. The girl who grew up on camera, stumbled through the same growing pains most young stars face, and found her way to a peaceful life mostly out of the public eye. Number 6. David Gallagher as Simon Camden. If there's one Camden child whose life after the show looks almost like a quiet, contented mirror of the character he played, it might be David Gallagher. He was 11 years old when Seventh Heaven premiered, playing the sensitive, thoughtful middle son, Simon Camden, a role that would define his entire adolescence and much of his early adult career. David Lee Gallagher was born February 9, 1985, in College Point, Queens, New York, to Elena Lopez and Darren James Gallagher, whose marriage ended when David was still a baby. His mother later remarried a man named Vincent Casey. Gallagher's career began remarkably early. He was working as a child model and actor from the age of 2, and by the time he was cast in Seventh Heaven, he'd already appeared alongside John Travolta in both Look Who's Talking Now and Phenomenon. Over his career, he earned 5 Young Artist Award nominations and a Teen Choice Award win for his work as Simon, appearing in a staggering 197 episodes across all 11 seasons. Beyond live-action work, Gallagher built an entirely separate legacy in gaming. He has voiced Riku in the Kingdom Hearts video game franchise since its 2002 debut, reprising the role across multiple sequels, including Kingdom Hearts 3 in 2019, a character many younger fans know him for without any idea he was ever a Camden at all. He also worked steadily in television afterward, including a run on the crime drama SWAT. Unlike some former child stars, Gallagher's transition into adulthood was notably smooth and drama-free. Sometime between 2017 and 2018, he became a father for the first time, and shortly after, he made the deliberate choice to step back from acting altogether to be a stay-at-home dad. In September 2024, Gallagher, alongside Beverley Mitchell and Mackenzie Rosman, spoke publicly for the first time about the abuse scandal surrounding their former on-screen father, Stephen Collins, on their podcast, saying plainly that all forms of abuse are inexcusable, while confirming he'd personally never witnessed anything troubling from Collins during their years together on set. Today, in 2026, David Gallagher is 41 years old, largely retired from the industry, and focused on raising his own family, the middle Camden son who grew up and simply chose peace. Number 7. Beverley Mitchell as Lucy Camden. She almost wasn't Lucy Camden at all. Beverley Mitchell originally auditioned for the role of Mary, the Camdens' athletic older daughter. Producers turned her down for that part, deciding she wasn't quite right for it, before reconsidering and instead offering her the role of younger sister Lucy on the spot. She was 15 years old when the series began, and she'd go on to play the character across all 11 seasons and 243 episodes, longer than almost anyone else in the cast. Beverley Ann Mitchell was born January 22, 1981 in Arcadia, California, to Sharon Mitchell, an office manager, and David Mitchell, an auto racing promoter. Before Seventh Heaven, she had already appeared as a young Nancy Sinatra in the 1992 CBS miniseries Sinatra, and her film debut came in The Crow City of Angels, where she played a teenage drug addict, a striking contrast to the wholesome minister's daughter she'd soon become famous for. She graduated from Chaminade College Preparatory School and briefly studied film production at Loyola Marymount University before her television career took off in earnest. Mitchell's Lucy would eventually marry Kevin Kinkirk, played by George Stultz, on the show, a plot point that echoed real life when Mitchell herself married her longtime boyfriend, Michael Cameron, in a 2008 ceremony in Ravello, Italy, with former castmates Jessica Biel and Mackenzie Rosman serving as bridesmaids. Beyond acting, Mitchell built a genuine second career as a country music singer, released her own recordings, and has continued taking television guest roles and TV movie leads over the years, including a 2026 TV movie titled Love in Storytown. In 2024, Mitchell became one of the founding co-hosts of Catching Up with the Camdens, reuniting with Gallagher and Rosman to walk fans back through the series they all grew up on. That same platform became the venue where she and her co-stars addressed the Stephen Collins scandal directly, expressing support for survivors of abuse while noting they'd personally never experienced any troubling behavior from him. Today, in 2026, Beverley Mitchell is 45 years old, a wife, a mother of 3, and one of the most visible keepers of the show's legacy through her ongoing podcast work. Number 8, Jessica Biel as Mary Camden. No one from this cast has traveled further from Glen Oak than Jessica Biel, and fittingly, no one's exit from the show was quite so loaded with controversy. She was only 14 years old when she was cast as Mary Camden, the family's athletic, basketball-obsessed second oldest child, after being discovered at a modeling and talent convention in Los Angeles at age 12. Jessica Claire Biel was born March 3, 1982, in Ely, Minnesota, and grew up moving frequently between Texas, Connecticut, and Illinois before her family settled in Boulder, Colorado. Even before Seventh Heaven, at 14 years old, she won a Young Artist Award for her performance as Peter Fonda's granddaughter in the acclaimed drama Uli's Gold, meaning she arrived on the Camden family's doorstep already an accomplished actress, not merely a fresh face. Then, in March of 2000, at 17 years old, Biel appeared in a revealing celebrity photo spread for Gear magazine, a decision that detonated across the conservative, faith-centered world of Seventh Heaven. Producers were reportedly furious and pursued legal action against the magazine over the shoot. Biel later said publicly that she deeply regretted the decision, calling it a really bad decision made while surrounded by people who weren't thinking about her well-being. The character of Mary was ultimately written off the show not long afterward, in circumstances the cast and fans alike have long linked to the fallout from that shoot, before Biel returned only sporadically as a guest star in later seasons. If the scandal was meant to sink her career, it did the exact opposite. Biel went on to headline major films across nearly every genre: The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Blade, Trinity, The Illusionist, The A-Team, Total Recall, before earning a Golden Globe nomination and an Emmy nomination for her leading role in the acclaimed USA Network drama The Sinner, which she also executive produced. She married pop superstar Justin Timberlake in 2012, and the couple share 2 children. Today, in 2026, Jessica Biel is 44 years old, one of the most successful actresses to ever emerge from a WB family drama, and unquestionably the biggest name to ever share a dinner table with the Camdens. Number 9, Barry Watson as Matt Camden. He was the reliable, easygoing oldest son, the emotional anchor of the Camden household for its first 6 seasons. And then, in the middle of the show's run, Barry Watson's real life delivered a plot twist far more frightening than anything the writers could invent. He was just 22 years old when Seventh Heaven premiered in the fall of 1996. Michael Barrett Barry Watson was born April 23, 1974, in Traverse City, Michigan, the third of 4 children, to an attorney father and a paralegal mother. His family moved to a Dallas suburb when he was 8, where he began modeling. His parents divorced when he was 14, and at 15 he moved to Burbank alone to pursue acting, quickly landing a contract role on Days of Our Lives. Before Seventh Heaven made him famous, he spent time parking cars at the House of Blues nightclub in Los Angeles while auditioning between jobs. On set, Watson also became a minor source of tension with producers over one particular detail. He flatly refused to cut his long, shaggy hair for the conservative, buttoned-up show, and eventually won that battle outright. In 2002, Watson was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a form of cancer, and stepped away from full-time filming to undergo chemotherapy and focus on his recovery. He returned for the show's 150th episode and continued as a recurring guest star through season 10, but did not appear at all in the show's 11th and final season. Watson beat the disease and went on to build a long, steady career, including lead roles in What About Brian and Samantha Who, and more recently, a striking supporting turn as media mogul Lachlan Murdoch in the acclaimed 2019 miniseries The Loudest Voice. Watson has been married 3 times, most recently to actress Natasha Gregson Wagner, the daughter of actress Natalie Wood, since 2014, and he's a father of 3. Today, in 2026, Barry Watson is 52 years old, a cancer survivor whose battle happened almost entirely out of public view, while millions of viewers simply wondered why Matt Camden kept disappearing from Glen Oak. Number 10. Stephen Collins as Eric Camden. And now, the story that changed how an entire generation looks back on this show. For 11 seasons, Stephen Collins played Reverend Eric Camden, the wise, endlessly patient minister who anchored every episode with a moral lesson. A character so trusted by audiences that Collins was widely nicknamed America's Dad. He was 48 years old when the series premiered in 1996. Already a respected journeyman actor with credits stretching back to the 1970s, including a role opposite Goldie Hawn, Diane Keaton, and Bette Midler in The First Wives Club, the very same year Seventh Heaven debuted, and decades earlier, a small but memorable turn as Commander Willard Decker in 1979's Star Trek The Motion Picture. Off-camera, he was also a published novelist, writing psychological thrillers with titles like Eye Contact and Double Exposure. That trusted image collapsed entirely in October 2014, when TMZ obtained an audio recording from a private 2012 therapy session in which Collins was heard admitting to serious past misconduct toward young girls, in incidents reportedly dating back decades to the 1970s and 80s. Networks immediately pulled Seventh Heaven reruns from their schedules, and Collins was dropped from ongoing projects, including Ted 2. Because the statute of limitations had long since expired on the alleged incidents, Collins was never criminally charged. One accuser, April Price, later spoke publicly in the 2025 Investigation Discovery docuseries Hollywood Demons about incidents she says occurred years earlier when Collins lived next door to her family. In September 2024, his former on-screen children, Beverley Mitchell, David Gallagher, and Mackenzie Rosman, addressed the scandal directly on their Rewatch podcast for the first time, condemning any form of abuse while noting they'd personally never witnessed troubling behavior from him during production. Collins' ex-wife, actress Faye Grant, to whom he was married from 1985 to 2015, was reportedly present for parts of the leaked recording and later divorced him. He has since remarried to Jenny Nagel, and by 2025, he was said to be living quietly and largely out of public view in Fairfield, Iowa. Today, in 2026, Stephen Collins is 78 years old, a man whose television legacy as the most trusted father figure in American living rooms has been almost completely overwritten by the truth that came out about the real one. Number 11, Catherine Hicks as Annie Camden. And finally, the steady, ever-patient mother who somehow managed to hold 7 children, a minister husband, and 11 seasons of chaos together without ever losing her composure on screen. Catherine Hicks was 45 years old when Seventh Heaven premiered, and she arrived with a career already stacked with far more range than most viewers ever gave her credit for. Catherine Mary Hicks was born August 6, 1951, in New York City, the daughter of a homemaker and an electronics salesman, and she grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, where she was a cheerleader and honor roll student before earning a fellowship to study drama at Cornell University. Long before Annie Camden, Hicks had already played Marilyn Monroe in the acclaimed 1980 television film Marilyn the Untold Story, earning an Emmy nomination for it, and had starred opposite William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy as Dr. Gillian Taylor in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. She also originated the role of the terrified mother, Karen Barkley, in the very first Child's Play film in 1988. Meaning the same woman who'd spend 11 seasons as television's most wholesome mom had just years earlier been running from a killer doll on the big screen. Hicks married special effects and makeup artist Kevin Gallagher in 1990, the man responsible for creating the design of Chucky himself in Child's Play, as well as later designing the look of Freddy Krueger for the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. A genuinely strange piece of trivia connecting Annie Camden's real-life husband to 2 of horror cinema's most iconic villains. Together, they have 1 daughter, Katie. Hicks earned her bachelor's degree studying English literature and theology at St. Mary's College in Indiana, background that, decades later, made her uncannily well suited to playing a minister's wife. And in between her genre film work, she also appeared in the comedy She's Out of Control, and played Carol Heath opposite Kathleen Turner and Nicolas Cage in Peggy Sue Got Married. Hicks largely stepped away from acting after Seventh Heaven concluded in 2007, taking only occasional television movie roles through 2016 and doing voice work as recently as 2020 before retiring quietly. When asked in 2023 about a potential reboot of the series, she shut the idea down bluntly, and her comments about her former on-screen husband have been unusually blunt as well. She has said openly that she and Stephen Collins no longer speak, telling one interviewer that if the show ever really did come back, it would start with Annie standing over Eric's coffin delivering his eulogy. Today in 2026, Catherine Hicks is 74 years old, largely retired and living privately, remembered by fans not just as the family's moral center on screen, but as one of the few original cast members willing to say, plainly and without flinching, exactly how she feels about the man who once played her husband. There it is, an entire hidden world that existed just behind the doorstep of the Camden family home. Cancer battles fought quietly out of frame, a tragic accident that took one half of a real set of quadruplets far too soon, a live television meltdown that somehow launched a second career, a minor supporting actor who grew up to become Superman, and, running underneath all of it, the far darker story of the man millions of viewers once called America's Dad, and the family he left behind to reckon with it. But all of it is part of one story. A story about how 11 years of Sunday night television can become 30 years of memory. About the enormous, sometimes uncomfortable distance between the characters we grew up trusting completely and the real people who went home once the cameras stopped rolling. Tell us in the comments, which of these stories surprised you the most? And which Camden was always your favorite? If you want to keep uncovering the real stories behind the classic shows that raised an entire generation, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. Every week, we go past the legend and into the life.